You might think local police policies and national security are totally separate things.
Yeah, most people probably do.
But right now, there's this huge battle over immigration, turning U.S. cities into, well, contested ground,
What?
and it's risking billions in federal money.
That's exactly the tension we're digging into today.
Yeah?
Our sources really lay out this dramatic clash. It's between the federal government trying hard to secure the borders
Right.
and this fierce resistance from what are often called sanctuary cities. We're going to focus mainly on Chicago because
Okay.
it's really become like ground zero for this fight.
Okay, let's unpack that. Our mission here is to get past the headlines, understand what's really at stake, especially for you, the taxpayer.
Hmm.
This isn't just a simple policy fight. It seems rooted in the federal government's view that uncontrolled immigration is a continuing and grave existential threat. That's strong language.
Very strong.
So we'll look at the strategy, the frankly startling amounts of money involved, and the legal powers being challenged on both sides.
So, to get the federal strategy, we need to understand this term they use, securitization to immigration.
Securitization, okay.
Yeah. What it means, basically, is the administration isn't just seeing border issues as economic or social. They're framing it explicitly as a national security issue,
Which means?
which means it demands what the sources are calling a war response mentality. Enforcement first. They believe it's just necessary for public safety and upholding the rule of law.
And the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, they're pretty specific about who they're after, right?
Very specific.
Mm-hmm.
Their stated mission is targeting criminal illegal aliens. They present it not as random sweeps, but as an effort to restore order, an order they claim local policies have, well, deliberately undermined.
And they have data to back this focus.
They do. And it's pretty striking. The main statistic they use to justify this more aggressive approach, it comes from ICE data.
Okay, what does it show?
It shows that more than 70% of all the arrests ICE makes are of aliens who already have pending criminal charges or actual convictions here in the U.S.
Wow, okay, so over 2/3.
Exactly. That figure suggests their enforcement is heavily focused on people already tangled up in the criminal justice system.
So if the numbers show they're targeting criminals, why does the rhetoric get so intense, like calling it a war?
Well, the language seems intended to match how serious they see the threat.
Right.
President Trump called it a war from within, said America was under invasion from within.
An internal invasion.
Yeah, she claimed the enemy is, quote, no different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult because they don't wear uniforms. And then you had Secretary Kristi Noem specifically calling Chicago a war zone.
That sets up a direct confrontation, doesn't it, with cities like Chicago?
Absolutely. And Chicago's response is rooted in its own laws. There are two key ones, the Welcome City Ordinance and the 2017 Illinois Trust Act.
Okay, wait. If this is a legal fight, what do those laws actually do? Break it down for us.
Sure. So basically they create a kind of buffer. The Illinois Trust Act, for instance, specifically tells local police they cannot hold someone just because ICE asks them to detain them for immigration reasons.
So local cops can't cooperate with federal immigration holds.
That's the core of it. They're legally restricted by state and local law from fully cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. And that's the direct source of this massive conflict.
And the White House saw this as, what? Obstruction.
Worse, they framed it as protecting lawbreakers. The argument was these policies protect criminals, not the victors.
Yeah.
And the response was potentially devastating. President Trump threatened to cut off all federal funding to sanctuary cities and states.
All fund, that's billions, right?
Billions. This is where you really see the pressure ramp up. For you listening, just grasp the scale. Chicago got nearly $2.5 billion in federal grants last year alone.
$2.5 billion, okay.
Now, only a tiny fraction, about 1.85%, went directly to migrants,
Right.
but the rest. That pays for essential stuff. Transit security, roads, public schools, domestic violence programs. Pulling that funding would basically cripple the city's operations.
And that's just the threatened cuts. What about the money the city is already spending because of its sanctuary status?
That's another huge piece. Chicago's already spent $574.5 million. That's over $500 million just on sheltering migrants since August 2022.
Wow. Local money.
Local taxpayer money. City leaders argue it should be a federal cost, but right now, Chicago's footing that bill.
So faced with losing billions in future funds and spending hundreds of millions now, what did the city leadership do?
Mayor Brandon Johnson doubled down. He publicly restated his vow to oppose federal pressure, arguing he had a duty to protect undocumented individuals, black folks, brown folks, Asian folks, basically sticking to the sanctuary policy despite the enormous risks.
So a political line in the sand.
Absolutely. And Washington responded with tactical action. This leads us straight to Operation Midway Blitz, or OMB.
Operation Midway Blitz? Sounds serious.
It was. DHS launched it specifically to crack down on sanctuary policies. They even named it to honor victims of crimes committed by illegal aliens, like Katie Abraham. Hundreds of federal agents, even National Guard troops, were sent into Chicago.
Wait, the National Guard sent into a U.S. city against the local government's wishes.
Exactly. That's a major point of friction. The White House deployed them, even though both Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Johnson explicitly said they didn't want them there. It's a direct challenge of state versus federal power.
And it got even more heated, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Sources say President Trump actually called for the arrests of Mayor Johnson and Governor Pritzker,
Arrest the mayor and governor on what grounds?
alleging they were failing to protect federal agents working in their city and state. I mean, that's an almost unheard of level of conflict between federal and local governments today.
Okay, so tensions are sky high. And then there was this incident involving a daycare. That got a lot of media attention.
It did. It became a huge flashpoint. Yeah. DHS actually put out a statement later titled, "Set the Record Straight," because they felt the media coverage was way off.
So what was the official DHS version? Why was it so contentious?
DHS said their officers were targeting a specific individual, Diana Patricia Santillana Galliano, an illegal alien. They claimed when the car she was in refused to stop, the people inside, including her, fled the vehicle.
Okay.
And then, this is the key part, they claimed these individuals tried to barricade themselves inside the daycare, recklessly endangering the children inside.
Inside the daycare.
With kids. That was the explosive claim. DHS later clarified she was actually arrested just outside, in a vestibule area, not inside the main school part. But the damage to the narrative was kind of done.
But the point the feds were making was clear. Sanctuary policies lead to dangerous situations like this.
Exactly. That was the intended message, that failing to enforce immigration law creates immediate, reckless danger. They also pointed out that this woman, Galliano, had apparently been released by the Biden administration previously and had then reportedly paid smugglers to bring her children across the border, an act DHS stressed is itself a crime.
So the street-level conflict was intense. Did it spill over into the courts?
Massively. The whole thing became a legal battleground. The federal government argued that court injunctions trying to stop Operation Midway Blitz were basically illegal judicial micromanagement.
Meaning the courts shouldn't tell law enforcement how to operate.
That was their argument. They said it violated the separation of powers, judges interfering with the executive branch's job.
The courts didn't just roll over.
Not at all. They pushed back hard, invoking the Constitution. One federal judge temporarily blocked Trump's use of the National Guard there, calling it unconstitutional.
On what grounds?
The 10th Amendment, which, for you listening, basically says any powers not explicitly given to the feds are reserved for the states. It's the legal bedrock for sanctuary city arguments that the feds can't force local resources into federal service.
So the courts upheld the state's side on that point.
In that instance, yes. And there were other rulings, too. Another judge found ICE agents had illegally arrested 22 people around Chicago without warrants. So the judiciary was definitely acting as a check, insisting that constitutional rights, like needing a warrant, still apply even during a major enforcement push.
This is already incredibly complex, but then the mayor of Chicago took it even further, right? To an international level.
Yeah, this was pretty dramatic. Mayor Johnson actually called on the United Nations Human Rights Council.
The UN to do what?
To investigate the U.S. federal government for what he called abusive immigration crackdowns in Chicago.
Wow. A U.S. mayor asking the UN to investigate the U.S. government.
Think about that. A local leader trying to use international pressure against his own country's federal government. His statement was striking. No country should be above international law. It just shows how high the stakes felt locally and how far they were willing to go to fight back.
So let's try to wrap our heads around this. What's the big takeaway from this deep dive?
Well, it really highlights a fundamental breakdown, almost like the system of federalism isn't working as intended in this area.
Yeah.
You've got the federal government on one side
Right.
saying it has a duty to protect national security from what it literally describes as an invasion, focusing on the criminal element within illegal immigration.
Okay, that's one side.
And on the other side, you have local leaders, backed sometimes by courts, citing civil liberties, the Constitution, especially that 10th Amendment.
To protect their sanctuary policies?
Exactly. Even knowing it means potentially losing billions in federal aid and spending hundreds of millions locally, it's a massive gamble.
So this core conflict, this securitization of immigration, it just creates this ongoing political pressure cooker, is how the source put it.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
This drive for border security and safety keeps crashing against local control and legal checks and balances. It's not going away.
It really forces a tough question, doesn't it?
It does.
If the federal government's own data says over 70% of the people they're arresting in these operations have criminal charges or convictions, does the political choice to be a sanctuary end up, in effect, prioritizing protection for lawbreakers over the safety concerns raised by the feds? It's a really difficult balance.
It is. And the cost isn't just dollars and cents. It's putting immense strain on the whole relationship between different levels of government in the U.S., a really fundamental conflict playing out right now.